On the first DVD, you saw Alan and I cast the different molds in different ways. You learned how to trim and assemble casts. Now on this DVD, you're going to see how Alan chases and sculpts those casts.
Okay, we got all the screws out of this horse, and we're going to start chasing and sculpting. The first thing I'm wanting to do here is to sort of smooth out those areas that we seam together. Sometimes the casts aren't exactly registered perfectly together because the paper does sort of shrink and do what it wants to do, and we're just trying to make it mind here what we want it to do. So I'm going to cut off some of these areas that are a little bit unnecessary, not quite shaped right. Just using an X-Acto knife here to do that. I'm careful not to have my thumb in the way. It looks like I do, but I don't. Then I take my burnisher and with a little pressure do a little smoothing, shaping. This is what I call dry burnishing. So I'm going to just work my way around this horse. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this horse. I'm going to bring it up to a place where we're all finished with it except for the final detailing of the mane and tail. Now I'm chasing some paper, some ready sheets, get those in place. And doing some chasing on this leg. This is the leg that the mount's going to go into, or it's going to be mounted, I'll put it that way. And you can see all the wrinkles there and the roughness. We've got the holes there from the screws, and with number 3 and number 4 sheets, I can chase over that. There, I've covered up the screw, kind of doubled the paper over it, and use the burnisher. I'm going to go over the whole horse, chasing out these wrinkles. You can see them pretty easily. Sometimes the paper gives you happy accidents, and you get little nuances that you want to leave, and sometimes you just don't want them and you chase them out. That's basically what you do as an artist. And artists have their different styles. Some bring them up to a higher level of completion, smoothness than others. And you can do that. You can make this very smooth, or you can leave it with a little more roughness if that's what your style is. That's up to you. But we bring ours up to a pretty high level of completion. I'm going to work my way around this and find areas I want to do first, like this elbow. I want a little more paper there, and I treat it kind of like clay when I wet it here and work it in. sculpt in that elbow. Just looking at this cast shows me what, and shows you what needs to be done, what I want to do. That area is pretty rough. You see, you just basically add skin. That's kind of like what's going on here, like skin grafting, I guess. I don't know, but it does chase on pretty easily and it smooths out pretty fast if you do it the right way. And that's what I'm trying to show you here. And I'll use the different thicknesses of paper. That side there is a little more convex than the other side. In other words, it needs a little more added on there to make it symmetrical on that bottom of the neck. So you can see, rather than adding a real thick sheet, I might take a sheet and paint it, fold it in half. That way I get it soaked in real easily, real quickly, and then I can go over it with another sheet and work that in with my burnisher. Now I'm looking at it, it looks a little more symmetrical. That happens. Sometimes it's in the original sculpture. You'll find things in your art, we all do, that we want to change. I've seen a lot of sculpture that I imagine the artist was working too fast and didn't quite get it the way it should be, and they probably wish they had an opportunity to go back and change it, but it's done. Bronze is finished, or whatever it is, and maybe they can fix it on the next one they do. There's that big paddle burnisher. You can see it's really nice for covering big areas in a quick amount of time. So I'm using bigger torn sheets here, these ready sheets. I've already got them sitting there. Pick them up with my brush, paint them on. Use my big paddle burnisher to smooth these big areas. We'll go over this horse a couple of times like this. You can get a lot done, then dry it, and then go over it again. I'm not going to do any more than the main part of the body, the neck, to the top of the legs and around the rump, and then I'm going to dry it. I want to work on both sides, maybe work underneath it a little more, get some of that horse, that stallion's anatomy sculpted in. Somehow I ended up with a mare, and I'm not sure how that happened. I'm going to sculpt in part of this underneath here, and then I'll get the other part later. But now he's a gelding. Eventually he will be a stallion, and you can imagine that that's not very hard to do. But I've got a lot of it done now that I want to get done at this stage. I'll continue working until I got this to the place where I want to dry it. I've worked both sides of it, and I'm kind of working around it. Sometimes what I do is I'll tear off sheets that are a certain thickness to fill in areas that kind of look like that area that need to be filled in. And other times I'll just work a big sheet over it all, and then I'll come back later and get it the way I want. Those little divots are what I'm talking about. You can tear off little sheets and fill them in and smooth it, and then finish it all up with a real thin sheet. Sometimes I work all the way to number 1. Here I'm drying the horse, so we'll get that horse dried, and then we'll go to the next step. Flip him over, get the other side. Okay, now fasten your seat belt, because this is something that is really cool. You're going to be able to work on your legs as a separate sculpture. I'm going to take a little off here right now before I circumcise this leg, and I could take it off with a knife, but I'm not going to. I'm going to take this leg off with my razor saw. I'm going to cut a nice clean cut, and I'm going to take that leg off, and then I'm going to take off the other 3. Okay, I try to cut these off about the same place so I can set it down and work on that body. So it's kind of just sitting flat, like it's standing on 4 legs, but it's standing on 4 even humps. Now, this is what I'm talking about. You can treat this as a sculpture. I just think, for me, it's easier to work on a leg as a sculpture than it is to work on a leg around 3 other legs, a body, and a head. I can get in there and really trim that up fast, shape it just the way I want, real fast, then reattach it later seamlessly. And I'll show you how to do that. But I learned to do this several years ago, and it's something that I do with my altered cast techniques, with the starter casts and posing the legs. And I've carried that through to working on, that didn't get, just tighten that up. I've carried that through to working on my my posed molds for bronze casts. I just like to do it because it chases out so fast, and the legs, when you're working on one, and you chase it all out, it gets kind of soft, and then you've got to dry it. I like to just do all 4 of them at once like this in a matter of an hour or so, and dry all the legs. Then I can work on that body, and then reattach the legs. So you can see I'm using my knife and using my burnisher. I can wet it and burnish it and smooth it, and it kind of works like sandpaper that way. Now I'm taking a sheet of the hard paper that's fairly thin, but I want to show you how to make board with this. It's not quite as hard as the board we make in the studio and manufacturing it, but it's pretty hard. It's just kind of a technique that I use to get all the hoofs the same size on my animals. So I'm basically laminating this paper to be about a 1/16 of an inch thick when I'm all done, when it's all dry. So I'm not that concerned about getting it exact because I'm really going to use it for something else. I'm going to be cutting this up too, but I'm actually putting 4 layers of paper together. Laminating them using my paddle burnisher to do that. Press it in and just laminate those sheets together to make board. And then I'm going to take that, peel it up off of my work table here with the end of a burnisher. You see, right now it's about 1/8 of an inch, but it's going to shrink up. It's got a lot of moisture in it, so it'll tighten up quite a bit. But I'm going to put it on my drying stand and dry that. Here's the bottom hoofs. The one on the left is my mounting one. Then there's the other 3 legs. And I could just sculpt those out and try to get them all the same. But I like to do it faster, and I like to make them look fresher and all the same. So I'm going to take my board. That's a template that I use on my 1/6 life-size horse, on this style of horse anyway. It's a Mustang, and I'm just going to trace out 4 of those on this board, this laminated board that I made. Hold that little template with my fingers. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll pin it on there. I need 4 of them, so I'm going to trace out all 4 of these real quick. And then I'm going to cut them out with a pair of scissors. And that's pretty thick board, and get that curve with my little fingernail scissors. Kind of even it out. I'm pretty sure hoofs aren't all exactly the same. The ones I've seen aren't, but they're pretty close, so they're pretty much the same size. So that's the result that I want. And when you chase, you can't always get them the same size, especially after you've registered them together and you've screwed them together, and sometimes they're just not all exactly the same size hoof when you're done. Sometimes they can get pretty distorted. The bottom's rough, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to chase on some paper and try to get that flat, so I can take that hoof shape that I cut out, that little hoof sculpture, and I can put it right on top of this wet paper and press it in. It's kind of working wet on dry and then applying dry to the wet. This will fuse real hard. So now I've got kind of a shape that I can sculpt the rest of that hoof to. I don't know if this makes sense to you. It is the way I do it. You can do your hoofs the way you want to do them. I just think they, for this method of sculpture, this is a good way to do it. You've got so much chasing to do, and if you want to do some cast alterations and whatever, you can do that. So I can go in and resculpt these areas that either didn't get cast well or didn't get cast right or didn't get cast at all. Because the paper, when you cast it, it kind of isn't like wax, where wax you get a cast that is probably 100% of what's in the mold, 99%. It's pretty good cast, resin, whatever, maybe even clay for your slurry when you cast in porcelain. The paper is a little different, but you can do things with the paper that you can't do in any other medium, and that's what attracts the eye. That's what collectors look at. They look at the detail, and they look at things that are done differently, and that's what they want. They want unique pieces of art, and the paper is unique. So you can see I'm working around the hoof here pretty fast and getting it shaped in the way I want, getting it smoothed out, chased out, sculpted out. This is an opportunity for you to make a lot of changes in your original casts. Really get those limited edition originals very original, much more than in bronze or any other medium where you have limited editions. So I'm going to kind of work around this one and show you how to do that. I won't bore you with all of them. We'll sculpt this out a little bit. Here on the close-up you can see roughness there, and I can add a little more to that joint, round it out a little bit with paper, and smooth it. This medium is really a fun medium to work with. You can do so much with it, and it's very forgiving. Very forgiving. It's clean. You don't have fumes. You don't have any toxins. Very little noise. You don't need a big space to do it. You can work on it, leave it, come back to it. It just has a lot of nice features to it. Now I'm using a nice long ready sheet to go over the top of that leg. Now I'm tearing kind of a thin sheet, and I'm folding it in half, kind of making it a little thicker. The reason we tear the paper rather than cut it is because it feathers in so nice. You've probably realized that. This is that little bump around the top of a hoof. Sometimes the horses have this, and it's more recognizable than not. Some horses, like I said, it really sticks out there a lot, and sometimes it's not as easily seen. So I just kind of make each horse the way I want to make them as I go. So I'm going to burnish that in, and I'll put some paper over it and burnish it again, just to sculpt it the way I want this hoof sculpted. There you can see the bottom of it. It's getting a little fat, but it's not quite shaped right. So when it dries, I'll cut and burnish and get it shaped a little better. And I don't really go up to where it's going to join. I can get that later. There's one of those divots right there by the tendon that I was talking about on the opposite side that we're going to want to take care of that right now. So I tear off number 4 sheet here, just some little pieces of paper, and I'm going to fill that right there and chase it on, take care of the way I want that to look. Now I'm going to dry that, and we'll start on another hoof here. Cut it out and do some dry burnishing. Get ready to put a hoof on there. So this is one of the back legs here, and again I'll just take my knife and start cutting off paper that I don't want to reshape this before I start chasing. You can see there's really some wrong areas there where it obviously was registered together, and it's hard to get those exact. I think it's hardened metal, and I've seen them pounding on metal and heating it and bending it and doing all kinds of things trying to get it to look right after it's been welded together, registered together. And I'm going to kind of carve in this tendon a little bit. I'm just cutting it out. Pull that paper out, and then I can do that on the other side. The front legs and the back legs are a little bit different, and so I want to show you each of those. And use that knife a lot to shape that leg. Now, I don't know what you're sculpting, whether you're doing animals, people, or inanimate objects, but you can use these techniques to do whatever you want to do. I'll get that joint back there. You can see I went right through. You got how thin that is right there, but I'll add paper to that. And wet it. When you wet it, it soaks in and softens it, and then when you can burnish it, you can really do some smoothing and reshaping. You can actually move this paper around a little bit when it's dry. I use different burnishers for different parts of my sculpture. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the hoof on, at the bottom of the hoof on that I cut by doing the same thing. This is fairly thick paper. It's number 4 sheet. And it kind of fills that divot in a little bit, that concave part of the hoof. And now I can put my template shape on top. You can see how much difference there is. And now I can go ahead and fill in to that hoof. I mean, it just takes out the guesswork of whether one hoof is the same size as another. I've seen all kinds of things and mistakes in different artists have made in their sculpture. I like things to look right. So and that's just me, and that's just my work. Some artists don't care that much. I've seen all kinds of rules broken where just the art of that particular artist is the fact that they break the rules and they get away with it. I like my art to look a certain way, so I bring it up to that level and try to be consistent in my work. I guess that's the biggest thing, is the consistency. And there's that back leg, nearly finished. Some little more chasing on that, and sculpting over and smoothing on. I'll be able to dry that leg too, and I'll move on to all the legs. Really doesn't take that long to do this. And like I said, you can reattach these seamlessly. They'll be stronger than they were before. But make my anatomical corrections here. That heel, I guess that's the Achilles heel of the horse. There's a little divot, and there's a little ready sheets, and fill that divot and make the corner of that Achilles heel, sculpt that in. And then I'll go over this little part of the hoof's anatomy at the top of part of the hoof. Get that shaped the way I want. Work it in. Now I'll put a little number 3 sheet over that. Take care of those areas that need a little more paper on it. Now we have this hoof the same size as the other hoof. And if that matters to you, this is the way you could do it. If it doesn't matter to you, then you do it the way you think makes sense to you. But I'm just trying to show you as much as I can on how to do this. So we'll dry that, and then we'll move to the next one, and then the next one. I'm not going to spend any time there doing them all. They're all dry. Now I can work out some of that roughness by doing some dry burnishing, hard dry burnishing. You can see it really starts smoothing out, and really push in on this. You can imagine what it'd be like doing that attached. I just like doing it this way. Now I'm going to reshape the top of that hoof to what I cut for the bottom, because this isn't quite, this is the one where I said it was, I'd have to reshape it later because it's a little too rounded there, and I wanted it to come and meet as where the point is on that hoof. And you can see there's a divot there that I'll have to fill in and get that back part a little more sculpted in the way it needs to be. So I'm just going over it one more time, getting them the way I want them to have before I reattach them to the horse. Like I said, you can go over things 2 or 3 times. Each time they get a little smoother, use a little thinner paper with your layers, and sometimes before it's thoroughly dry, and I'll show you that when we get to the rider. So I'm going to cut in that back part of the hoof where it's a little bit of a hole or a recess in the back of a horse's hoof. It's just part of the anatomy on a hoof. Right here. Use my knife and set it on my cutting board and work around it, and with a nice sharp blade so I can get that out of there. And now I'm going to work the frog into that hoof. The bottom of a hoof has anatomy to it. It's not flat like this on a horse. It's got kind of a V shape or a triangle on the back of it here, and then it's got a little bit of anatomy on either side of that triangle, little almost like a rough part of the frog on either side of that. And it is concave a little bit on the bottom of the hoof. I'm going to wet this and wet around where I've done all this carving and start burnishing that before I start going over it and doing some final chasing. I'm working that frog in on the bottom. I was going to pick up a little piece of cut paper because it looked like kind of what I wanted to put in there, but I'll just tear it. Cut paper were fighting me. Sometimes I'll use little snippets of cut paper to do what I want to do, but here, this is what I'm talking about. On either side of that triangle, there's a little bit of a part of the bottom of the hoof that needs to be there. It kind of parallels that triangle, so I'm sculpting that in right now. People who know horses, know animals, they pick up stuff right away. And sometimes they won't buy the art if it doesn't look right. If it's real stylized or whatever, then that just depends on the consumer and what they like. But I've had a lot of people tell me that they like my horses, so I just do them all pretty much the same, and then I can sell the art, and I know I can sell it, and I know that's what you all are interested in doing, that are professionals. That's the definition of a professional, is someone who makes their living doing what they do. If you do this as a hobby, that's one thing. Or you may do this part-time, be professional part-time, but I'm professional full-time. I try to make my work all look consistent, and I try to sell it. And so I'm working in these divots and on the knees here, this front leg, and getting that smoothed. And some more of this roughness taken out. I really like working wet on dry and letting it soak in and then going back, finishing it off. And I put my awl in there just to hold it. So it gives me something. I do that a lot. I use those awls to hold the sculpture, give me a handle to work on the sculpture without having to touch it. And just cutting the under part of that knee away, getting that shaped right on that leg. Now I'm doing some smoothing on the upper part of the leg here. And where I cut it away, I want to smooth that out with my burnisher a little bit. And I can dry that. Now, we'll start on the next one. And I'll do all of them and get them drying. So, while they're drying, let's work on the body of this horse again. First thing I want to do is make a cut on the back of the neck here. I'm cutting all the way through. The reason I'm doing that is he's got a mane, and I want to be able to use that groove that I'm cutting in there to apply the hair to his mane. So I'm just going to cut all the way through with my knife. Start back here a little bit and get it all the way through to the bottom. Alright. I wet it, and that softens it a little bit, and that gives me a place to spread a little bit with the back of this knife part of the burnisher. You can see I got a nice slice there, and kind of smooth the top out where I wet it there. Now I'm looking at the body and the head, and I want to start resculpting this head a little bit, tearing off my ready sheets and working my way over this body. I just got him laid down right now. On my cutting board, my soft cutting board. Look him over, see what I gotta do. Underneath that head where the jaw bones go together, I'm going to fill that divot with some little number 4 torn sheets and paint those on and chase those on. And burnish it in with my burnisher, a round burnisher. I want you to notice the different kinds of burnishers I use and where I use those. It's kind of important, and the size of the brushes too, and the size of these and shapes of these torn sheets where I'm putting those. I do this kind of thing instinctively, and to me, after 24 years, this is like breathing. I imagine I'll be breathing for a while longer, but I've been doing this for 24 years, and I've never gotten tired of it. It's so therapeutic, and it's just really fun. Just get lost in this sculpting in the paper. I like detail. I think my work shows that, and Patty does too, and her work shows it. So, and I like to get things right. I like to do things well and work on my results and work on learning more. I think when professionals are tired of learning, when they're tired of what they're doing, they need to get out of what they're doing. If you're bored, you should probably do something else. I'm passionate about this, and I just want to do the best job I can. There I've folded the sheet. I'm working the lips in on this horse. And the nostrils, I'll do that the same way. I'll kind of roll a sheet and get the nostrils done. Horses have chins too. I'm getting that chin. I don't know if you've ever looked at horses, but horses all look different to me. Even if it's the same kind of a horse, like a Mustang or a Thoroughbred, they have differences, just like people, from one horse to another, just like people from one person to another. Even twins have differences. I guess that's what you get with being able to work on these casts. It's like the bronze. You get that limited edition original kind of thing going on because you do so much chasing and sculpting back in. You just get to be able to do a lot more with the paper. And you can see how I'm manipulating this paper to get the look that I want around the mouth and the lips. Here I'm making an eyeball. I've wet that paper, and I just want that eyeball to stick out a little bit like it does on a horse. So I'm working the paper so it's kind of round, bulged out, and then I can place it over top where the other eyes were, just to give me the symmetrical look that I'm looking for. It looks funny now because the paper has so much water in it. It going to go down when it dehydrates, but right now it's needs to be chased down a little bit too. But it does change when things dry. They look a little different than when they're wet. That's part of mastering this medium. I don't think it's much different than watercolor. An artist has to know their medium and what it's going to do, how to master it. Clay, I don't think it takes much to master clay. I mean, you put it in one place and come back 100 years and it's the same way it was. That's not to say that an artist working in clay is not a master artist. That there's a difference between mastering a medium and a master artist. You could master this medium and not be a master artist, and vice versa. Maybe this just isn't the medium for some master artists, but if you're a sculptor and you master this medium, it's kind of like a watercolor artist that's mastered the medium of watercolor. I think that's a lot more difficult to be a master artist in the medium of watercolor than a master artist in the medium of oil painting or something like that. Michelangelo did a lot of tempera paintings, egg temperas, and I don't know anybody does that anymore because it was so hard. Painted the Sistine Chapel, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in egg tempera, and that's where they actually put plaster down and use pigments that are mixed with egg to paint into that wet plaster, and then it dries. And oh man, I don't know how he did that. That's a lot harder medium than this is. So not every medium is as easy, but it's what an artist does with the medium that really shows. You can see I'm kind of going over this whole horse now with thinner paper. Now I'm working in the nostrils, where I kind of roll it and get those bottom ones in first, and then go over the top. There's a certain shape to the nostril, depending on how the horse is breathing. Sometimes they're wide open, sometimes they're not as open. Really depends on that horse and whether he's flaring them or not. So we'll get this all sculpted in on this side, and we'll do the other side. It's kind of roughed in right now. Got a close up on it and let you see how you can kind of use the different tools and the different techniques to shape that. And there is about as far as I'm going to go on that. I'll dry that horse, and I did the other nostril. Now I'm doing a technique where I wet the paper and I use that kind of a round end on that burnisher to feather it up a little bit, and then I can use my paddle burnisher to smooth it out. And just in that area there's a divot there, but it gets a little smoother. Doesn't matter much because the saddle's going there, but I just wanted to show you that. Now I'm going to burnish these legs out a little more. Now this is the leg that he's going to be standing on, so I didn't bother finishing out the bottom. I want it flat so I can mount it easily. I wet it and burnish it hard, shaping out that hoof a little bit this way, and filling a divot, just kind of getting these legs where they're finished so I can reattach them. I get them all done, and now I'm drying them and working on them and drying them and getting them up to the finish. Same with the head. So I can wet that and burnish around those nostrils. And it's kind of interesting at this point because you can see a lot of nuances that you want to leave. Some things just look great, and other things you want to work on a little bit. It doesn't take that long to do this. You can see I wet it and take that burnisher, and I can just kind of form a little bit while the paper's hard but wet on the surface, dry underneath. Sometimes it's dry on the surface and wet underneath. And depending on what you want to do and how you want to do it, you're going to find both those techniques are useful. Here I'm just getting that lip, that bottom lip, exactly the way I want it. Before I put the war bridle in, I'll have that all done. He needs his eyelids, so I'm going to move to that. Sculpt those eyelids on. And I'm just going to tear some paper and fold it over. And I do the bottom eyelids first because I think top eyelids overlap bottom eyelids. That's just the way it is in my head. They probably don't. They probably kind of meet in the middle, but the corners might overlap that way, especially on the back side. And I got the tuck tool burnisher that I'm using to get the corners of those eyes, and I can also use it to work that top eyelid so it shows up a little bit better. when it dries a little bit, I can finish it off even better. There's an eye. Now I'll put a little more on the corner and work that in, just because I think it needed a little bit more there. And then I'll have to do the other eye. This horse needs some ears, so we're gonna have to put some ears on this horse. And get in the nose here, nostril, that round into that burnisher, round it off in there, smooth it a little bit inside while it's dry underneath and wet on the surface. Shape it around. And get the other eye done. His face is just about there. Now let's put the ears on. So what I'm going to do, where those ears were that I didn't cast, you could see where they were. I'm going to make a hole. I'm just going to take out that paper and I'm going to make a hole through there. Of course, it's hollow inside. And there's the other side. Make sure it's symmetrical now. So I've got the ears in the same place on both sides. Then I'll wet those holes. And I'm going to open them up a little bit with a tool there. It's kind of the way it should be. Now this is leather, thick leather paper. And what I'm going to do is cut out a shape that's almost a triangle, but there's a little curve at the top where the ears kind of point in on the horse, the tip of the ears. Now I've got two. And then I'm going to take that and wet it, just one of them. And I'm going to wet it on both sides. You can use hard paper for this. Doesn't have to be leather paper. Should be thick enough. If it's not, then you can thicken it later. And I bend this kind of like the horse's ears on animals are bent in. They kind of fold in on themselves where they kind of come out of the head there. Now I'm pushing it into that hole with my burnisher just to get the ear the right size. And I'm putting it back a little bit. When he's running, his ears are back. And they're very, it's more of an alert position for those ears. Now I'm making sure I get this started the wrong way and folding it the right way, so that point, if I put it in right now, it would be right. It would be pointed in toward the center of the horse's head, but because I'm putting them back, then that point will go more toward the sky. Ears on animals, they move them around. I've seen people could wiggle their ears. I can't, but I always admired that. But horses and animals wiggle their ears a lot. And kind of turn them in to listen to you when you're talking to them. It's like people turn their head, especially people who are hard of hearing like me. I'm not that hard of hearing, but I spent some time in the Marine Corps and I lost some hearing because of all the firing I was around. Anyway, I got those the way I want them, and I'm now working in some paper on the bottom to fill in the holes and to work around those ears to get those ears attached real well. And like I said, that's why I don't cast the ears. I can make them any way I want. I can put them where I want them. I can make them as big or small as I want. And I actually think it would take less time to do it this way than to try to cast them and chase them out. Now I'm adding some real thin paper, number 2 sheet, to go over top, just make them a little thicker, and to make them so I can chase them out easier, make them a little smoother, and stronger, attach them more, and work around the jaw there a little bit, smooth some more paper on that just to finalize it. The head is pretty close to being finished at this point. Might have a couple things I want to do to it, but it's just about there. I think it turned out pretty good. So now we'll take it and dry it. There's my horse. Alright, he's dry. Let's put the legs on. I take some of this bender board, that's a strip, and I'm going to cut this strip in 4 little sections. Now these I'm going to roll. That's why I call it bender board. You can bend it. And it's acid free. And work it in, and I bend, it's kind of a post. And then I'll take a strip of paper and I'll wet the paper. There's a ready sheet that'll work. And I'm going to roll that paper around this bender board wet. And as soon as I do that, it relaxes the bender board, it makes a post, and it gives me some place to attach. I'll put that post in the holes of the lower leg that's been circumcised off to the upper leg. But to do that, I want to make sure it's wet inside both places and that the hole's big enough to work with my my post. I'll open that hole up a little bit, that burnisher, and then I'll try it in here. It's a little loose, so I'm going to put a little more paper on there. Tear a ready sheet with both the paper and the post, wrap it around. This is going to be very strong when I'm done, and it's going to hold it real well. Now I'll put a little strip on the bottom. What I want to do is create the paper to be kind of mushy and wider there, so it'll fit up there snug and squish out. And when it squishes out that way, I can adjust that leg where I want it, turn it on there, and then I can burnish this. And I'll get it as smooth as I can, and then I'll come back, and when I do the final chasing at that joint, you can see I really didn't get it real smooth around where I'm joining these together, because I knew I'd have to come back and reattach the legs, and that's when I can do that. So I'm going to do some chasing around where I added that leg right now and go over top that joint, and you're not going to be able to tell where I put this leg on when I'm finished. It's going to be seamless, and it's going to be on there. It's going to be probably one of the strongest parts of this horse. Kind of like when you weld things, it gets to be very strong there. That's what happens here. And you can see it's a little swelled out, and I'm not worried about that, because I can come back and trim that and chase over it later. But I'm going to get a little more on the upper part of the leg. Get that leg kind of the anatomy on there the way I want it at this point. Now let's go ahead and attach the other front leg. Would be the horse's right front. You know the drill. Wrap that bender board after I bent it in the wet paper. It's probably number 3 sheet. I don't care much about how neat this is right here. In fact, if it's a little rough, that's not going to hurt anything at all. Might even stay in there a little better. Gives more things to grab onto in that hollow space. Push it in there. Get it nice and wet. Wet the hole in where the sculpture meets itself on the inside. Those joints, I mean. Get everything nice and wet, and they'll start fusing. It's dry, what I call bone dry and rock hard. It's permanent. Some more sheets on there. Those are number 2 sheets there. And number 3 sheets. If you get too thick here, then you see it. Yes, he's a stallion now. Work on the inside of that leg. Burnish that down. Get all these ready sheets on where I want them, and then I'll work that burnisher over it all. And using that razor saw, I get nice clean cuts, and it goes right back where I want it to go. Now let's reattach back legs. This is the left rear leg. It's going to come outside. The way a horse runs is the way most animals run. That back leg in full gallop is a little wider than the front, so we'll reattach that there, and then we'll get the mount leg in place. These are fairly thin sheets. I still have some chasing underneath, you can see that, and I'll get that done at some point. And I'll chase that on, and then the last leg. So I don't think I need to show you how I put it in there or how I chase it up. Let's just dry that now. Now it's dry. Now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to start trimming this out, getting off the excess so I can do my final burnishing where those legs are attached. And laying there is my rider. We'll go sculpt him next. But there's going to be a lot of differences between doing him and this. And I won't spend as much time on the buffalo. There's so much of it. It's going to be repetitious, and I'm just not going to put anybody through that. But there are some things that that will be different, and I do want to show that. So I'm going to trim off some of these fat areas, like I said I would, and smooth those out. Get that Achilles tendon defined there, and do the front legs. And you can see there's still visible evidence where I reattach these. I'm right here sculpting in where the muscles would be on that front leg. Just using my knife to cut those in, and kind of shaping this the way I want, getting the last bit of sculpting done on this horse before I mount it. And then to finish it all off, I'm going to do the mane and the tail. But I'm not going to do that final finishing next. I'm going to start on the man, on the rider, and I'm going to bring the buffalo up to that level too, where I just have to do the last bit, the last finish on them. But I wanted to go from assembly to chasing and resculpting on these pieces before we get into the total finish, and I wanted to carry that all the way through. Unlike the cast, trim, and assembly DVD where I showed casting on all of them, and then trim, came back and showed you trim and assembly. I wanted to stay with this a little bit longer, just to be a little more consistent. And this for brevity, because I don't want to do a lot of repetition, but a lot of this is repetition, and you probably see that. I think you learn by watching and by listening. And if you want to jump on something and get it going and then come back and finish, we have actually 5 DVDs in this series, and most of them are close to 2 hours long, so that's 10 hours of instruction, and that's a pretty good class. You're going to learn a lot, and so just bear with me with the lecturing, because it's where I have a chance to explain some things as I'm doing them, and you can watch. So now we're kind of finishing up the legs now, and where I've got to do this final chasing on the legs at the point of attachment. So I've got the horse dry now, and I'm going to mount it, but this is not going to be the strong mount like the buffalo. I'm going to punch a little hole, or get a hole started in the center of that hoof. Then I'm just going to take a deck screw, one that's long enough that I won't go through where it's bent there at the ankle, but up through that hard paper, just to give me a mount. And because there's not as much steel all the way, it's not as strong. But I wanted to show you 2 different kinds of mounting. I can make this sturdy enough when I do the framing and mounting on the frame, and I'm going to show you how to do that too on the last DVD. So here I'm just doing some final burnishing, finish this up, and then we will do one last thing on this horse. The horse needs a tail, so we're going to sculpt the tail next. Alright, this is a number 5 sheet, and take my straight edge. This is my ruler straight edge. I just found it handy. It also kind of shows you how big this is. And I'm going to tear it from the back side, just because of it's a better way to do it. And now I have a triangle. Okay, so now it's fairly thick paper, so I'm going to use my thinner bonding agent, and I'm going to paint one side of this paper, just one side, and I'm going to let it soak in a little bit. Okay, now let's get in close and look at this. I'm going to lay a 1/16 or 1/32 inch brass wire on here, and with my tuck tool burnisher I'm going to roll it over that wire and tuck it underneath roll, tuck, and kind of slide it around. Now I'm going to roll it on that wire. So now we have, well, we got a loose end there, so I'm going to wet that, burnish that down. I'm going to take it off the wire, and you can see we've got kind of a tail there, and we're going to bend that the way we want it eventually. I'm just kind of working it in right now, getting some of the memory changed on this, seeing what I want to do. I'm going to straighten it out now and wet it again and burnish some of those thick edges off. I don't worry about this so much because it's not going to be seen, but I just wanted to get a little smoother. Now I'm going to rebend it the way I want. It's kind of an S-curve. S-curves give anatomy a little life. It's kind of a classical thing that we do as artists. I'm going to shorten it a little bit with a pair of scissors at the tip to get it the size I want. Now that's a horse's tail, and I'll prove it to you. There's my horse and there's his tail. So I just need to take that tail and dry it. So we'll take it and there you go. It's going to look like that. There's the rider. He's being patient, and we're going to work on him next. But that's how the tail's going to go on. But we have to dry it first. So I'm going to take it and put it on my drying stand. And now it's dry. Now I'm going to punch a hole in that horse's backside, just like I did in his head for his ears. These knife blades sometimes loosen up, and these X-Acto knives, sometimes I put a hole through it and put a wire through there, and got some of them fashioned that way, because the paper wants to grab that blade and pull it out of the knife. It's a little annoying sometimes. So I guess I could use a drill to drill that hole in too. I just don't want to get my drill. So now I've got the hole, and we're just going to do a simple attachment here. We're going to take bonding agent, put it in the hole, a little more, and put it on the end of the tail, and we're going to stick it in there. Now the horse is ready for hair, that mane and tail. Got it the way I want. I'll just let that dry, and we'll now move to the man. Let's start working on him. I'll take off this tape where his hand is, and we got him all seamed up. Still got to take the tape off and the screws out. So we'll do that. Back these screws out. Some of them are longer than others. Big one through his chest there. Now I'm starting to chase out his face, which has a lot of detail in a small area in that mold. But I I pulp casted this, and I wanted to show you what I could do with it. And like I said, I probably could have gotten a lot better face had I sheet cast this, or at least part of it. Okay, I'm going to start chasing out the face and body and arms on this man. He's the rider. He's going to be on that horse. When I did it for a bronze, I sculpted in paper these pieces and from my starter casts, and then sealed them and molded them. But I molded the paper, but I did them so I could do them separately. I didn't join the rider to the horse and mold it all that way. A lot of sculptures are that way, and you just deal with what you have. I chose to do it this way. That way I could maybe use my horse and rider in other sculptures, and I have. So that's why I did that. Now get that arm, smooth that a little bit. So I'll chase some on that with my paper. Number 4 sheet. Because it's so rough, it will kind of work its way in. I can sculpt it in, chase it out faster with a number 4. And work on his back. I'm working my way all the way around this. You can see it really starts smoothing out very fast. If you have a lot of detail in certain areas, you may want to try some techniques that you find work better for those areas, as sheet casting or pulp casting, or you can take the paper and chop it fine and mix it with bonding agent, almost what I call bead dust. Cast the mold with that before you go over top of it with sheet casting. There are so many techniques in casting, and if you have an issue you don't quite understand, you can call me or email me and I will step you through it. You're going to have to do chasing no matter what you do, especially in casts that you have to join. They got to do that everywhere, and in any kind of sculpture where you're doing more than just one solid cast. Even if it is a solid cast, you're going to have lines that need to be chased out where the molds fit together. That's just That's just the nature of the beast. It's no different here. It just gives you more of an opportunity to do some original things in this medium, detail that you can't do elsewhere. I don't know any other medium any pure fine art medium that you can get the amount of detail that you get in this medium. Okay, I'm working around him and getting all that roughness out. There's a lot there, and it, like I said, it didn't have to be that rough. But I just want to show you how you can deal with that if your casts aren't as good as you want them to be, and it gives you good practice. You're going to get better at all of this if you stick with it. You will get better at casting. You will get better at all of it. Chasing, sculpting. So we'll dry him out now. We'll go back. He's not totally dry. This is where earlier I was talking about where you've dehydrated that sculpture a little bit and then bringing it back where it's not thoroughly dry, burnishing it. And you can also wet it and burnish it so it's at a place where you can kind of move that paper around a little bit and form things the way you want them before you finalize it. I'm kind of putting some rib markings in here and re-wetting it and going over and doing a little more burnishing to smooth him out. His back is bare back, except that he's going to have detail with the accessories of the quiver and bow case and a sharp's carbine, because this is taking the bull with the bow, not the rifle. He's going to come back and dispatch any wounded animals with that rifle instead of with a bow and arrow. Okay, let's work on this arrow hand. This is the right hand, and I'm going to kind of restore these fingers a little bit by rolling some paper and putting it on top, working those fingers in. So it's paper stuck to my burnisher there because I had got a little dry paper on the burnisher and it pulled it off again. The best way to clean your tools, your burnishers, your brushes, is just to soak them in water a little bit. Warm water for a half hour or so, or maybe not even that long, and then taking a rag or a sponge or some kind of an abrasive cleaning tool and wiping them off, depending on how long they've been in the water, how soft that paper's gotten in the bonding agent. You can see my hands, how much bonding agent's dried on my hands. That'll just wash off. And then if it starts drying my fingers, which tends to do to me, I can put some of that hand cream on there at night, and that'll put the moisture back in my hands. I just don't like working with gloves unless I have to. Now I'm going to use this dental tool to kind of define these fingers a little bit. See the hands taking shape pretty fast. Pretty fast. I just think it's easier to sculpt the hand off the arm, the top part of the arm. I do that with our starter cast too. A lot of those starter casts, you just get hands, then you sculpt the hand, then you can attach them. I do that all the way up to life size. I'm varnishing that paper on top of the hand. He needs to have a little more around there. He's kind of thin in that arm. Now there's a chunk here that I want to take out that part of the cast that shouldn't have been casted. I mean, it was one of those areas in the mold that was just kind of hard to figure out what was going on there. So it got casted, and then I'm cutting it out. You find that in wax, and you find it in metal. Probably resin and clay too, slurry. I don't work too much in those two mediums, but anything that's molded is going to have areas that need to be retouched. It's just the way it is. You see those little black specks on my paper? That's a little piece of my cutting board. I'll pick those out when I get to it. And here's the eyes, where the eyes need to be. This poor guy's face. We're going to have to give him a face. I turn it upside down and try to look and see where I need to make these eyes symmetrical both ways. Push it in. It's kind of neat being able to work with something that's dry and wet and hard and soft, and knowing your medium, knowing what you can push on and how hard to push it, and flatten things like his forehead here, and get those little anatomical areas kind of the way I want them. I'm building out the mouth a little bit, and in that soft paper, it's almost like clay at this point, and adding on to it and working in that detail, getting around the neck, adding a little more paper to the nose area, and finding where that bottom is. Smooth out the forehead a little more. It's really getting a lot of moisture in it at this point. And it's soaking in. Let's get the top of the nose, the bridge of the nose put on. working where kind of the corner of the eyes, putting a face back on him, and trying to get it symmetrical. Now, people's faces are not symmetrical. They just need to look like they are. The more symmetrical a person's face is, the better they look. But people's faces are not symmetrical. Not perfectly symmetrical, anyway. Alright, I rolled some paper for the lips, and now I'm putting the lips, top and bottom lip. Did the bottom first and then the top on top, just like the eyelids. Now I'm going to take that arm off. I'm going to just take it off with this knife. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it's getting in the way of me sculpting the face. You can see I can reattach that just like I did the legs on the horse. I'm going to open up those holes now so I don't have to do it later. There we go. And then it'll go right on just like the legs of that horse. And continue working on this face, getting the nostrils worked in, and the lips defined. You can see how this medium is very much like soft clay at this point. And that's why I show you so much of this, because I think you learn by watching and listening, and then you can do, and that's where you really learn, is by doing. But without seeing, then you won't have any idea what to do, and what tools to use, and what papers to use. I mean, the different thicknesses of paper, different kinds. We have so many different kinds of paper. This close-up, you can see I'm kind of working around the eyes a little bit, and getting that shaped in, a lid under there, and working around the nose. I'm still kind of roughing this in. I'll get it all formed in and dried, and then I can work on it some more later after I get some more moisture out of it. But you can see that from where I was before, just a short time ago, I've got that face worked in. It was almost like a starter cast when I started. The smaller your cast is on something like this, like a face, the more you're going to have to go back in and chase and sculpt and define, because the paper just wants to wrinkle whether you're working on something big or small, and whether you, no matter what kind of casting you do. So if it's a big area, then it just seems to smooth out easier, faster, because the wrinkles aren't nearly as deep on something in a larger scale. So now I'm working that soft paper in, and I'm getting close to where I want to stop working on this and dry it, or work on another part of it. Some final little fussing with it. Let's get that little divot under the nose in there, and using the back of my dental tool I can form that in, and the lips. Bottom lip. He's going to have an arrow in his mouth. That's why that hole in the corner, or well, it's sort of a hole. It's going to be a hole before I'm done. I'm going to put some on his legs. I'm going to do some chasing, and on his back, a little more smoothing and chasing before I dry him. Because the sculpture is in different parts, he's got the body, and then he's got the arms as separate. I can be drying that body and then working on here his right hand, and I got a lot of paper in there that I want to get out of there, and redefine the fingers, cut, wet, and shape on the hand, and quickly bring that hand up to the level that I want it, like the other hand and like the body, before I dry it. Now I'm going to put an awl in this arm, the back of the elbow, just to hold it. That gives me a handle, because that arm is little and I want to be able to work on it without disturbing what I've worked on. It's easy enough to fill a hole, and that awl will really give me a nice firm grip on my sculpture, and it will keep my sculpture in place while I work on it easily. I can burnish on it fairly hard, and here I'm doing the same with the other arm, and bring this up a little more. I'm going to carve the top a little bit, flatten that out, and chase some paper on it, start sculpting it. I've got the other one drying with the body while I work on this. Or I can set it aside and dry them all together. It's got some muscle lines in there from the original sculpture and the mold, and some are wrinkles. I'll use what I want and change what I don't want. And I'll do it quickly. Now I'm going to work that finger. This finger is the index finger on the left hand, of course, and he's holding a bow with that left hand, and the arrow, he's firing from his right, but the end of the arrow he's holding with the finger right there to guide it and to hold it a little bit in place on the bow till he gets to his target, which is right between the ribs on the buffalo. And when the horse moves up alongside the buffalo, he releases the arrow. And his hands being busy, he can't hold the reins. So the horse is taking knee commands from the rider. And he has a lot of experience with this. He's very well trained. Okay, we're about finished with this lesson, so please insert Disc 3, your molds in the Eckman Method, sculpting and detailing.